Hey, welcome back to the Vince Del Monte podcast. We have an outstanding show planned for you today. And before we introduce our super special guest, I'm really happy to be here with you again today to help you develop the 5 M's of manhood: muscle, mindset, money, mission, and marriage. I think we're going to touch on the majority of these here today. And, the purpose of our show is to give you simple, no-nonsense insights, things that you can apply to your life to help you become a better man. And the more you know, I'm finding these days, the harder it is to grow because you start getting exposed to so many new opportunities. And an idea that our guest introduced to me recently called Hidden Truth. So we're going to talk about that shortly. But just a quick reminder, this podcast is free if you're new here. It will likely always be free of advertising. All we ask for in exchange is some love and to leave it a review. And this month, in exchange for that, you can hook yourself up with some free M5 apparel. Just go to m5apparel.com, find yourself an outfit, screenshot your review, send it into my DM, and drop your name, email address, and your home address, and we'll get that shipped out to you as just a token of our appreciation. If you are completely new here, I'd recommend going back to our first 5 episodes, laying down the 5 M's of manhood. This is where you can get a really further understanding of how these 5 M's have formed my life, almost in seasons, if you will, not all at once, and why this podcast is helping so many men. And I normally don't do longer, but I believe that today's conversation is going to really require a lot of context to many of the ideas and concepts you're going to be challenged by today. I know I sure was when I heard our guest speak just a few weeks ago at the Empire Mastermind in an intimate setting, and I think it'll really give a lot of clarity to the conversation today. So I feel it is necessary to share Tim Larkin's formal bio before we dig into our main content. So formally, Tim is America's leading pro-victim rights and personal safety advocate, and has had his fair share of, I love how he puts this, controversy after being named the 2011 Self-Defense Instructor of the Year and simultaneously inducted into the Black Belt Hall of Fame. Tim ended the year by taking on the UK Home Secretary and getting banned from the UK for his stand on a citizen's right to defend themselves from imminent violence. By the way, I never knew what the word imminent meant. I don't know if I fully understand it, but Tim's going to explain it to us shortly. Currently, Tim is appealing that decision from the UK government, and his speaking engagements have never been more pointed and engaging as violent crime rises and economic weakness causes severe cutbacks in police forces in the Western world. As a fellow Canadian, I come from a place where we would leave our front doors open, and we've actually been exposed to more violence than ever just this past half year. So this conversation can't come more timely. A former military intelligence officer, Larkin was part of a beta group that redesigned how special operations personnel trained for close combat. He has a 25-year career where he has trained people in 52 countries in how to deal with imminent violence. Over 10,000 clients are trained in his target focused training, TFT for short, from military special operation units, special law enforcement teams, celebrities, and high-profile business leaders on how to use physics and physiology to injure any human or humans trying to attack them. TFT is the original, here we go, grade 5 language. I love it, Tim. Reality-based fighting system. Okay, we're all on the same page now. His numerous magazine covers and articles in the martial arts and self-defense industry are as controversial as his pro-victim advocate position on self-protection. He is a highly sought-after speaker as well as the media's go-to guy on self-defense and victims' rights. And as I just mentioned, I recently had the chance to hear Tim talk about his principles taken from his experience, and we're going to unpack those today. I'm sure just a small handful of them. so that you can apply them to your fitness, to your business, to your relationships, and to your life. Just another sidebar here. I think it's super cool to share that, I got connected with Tim also through his son, body weight fat loss expert Connor, who's part of our Hustle and Hunt program, seen awesome success. And I think it's really cool that we're here together today. So, hey, Tim, thank you for joining us and welcome to the call.
Hey, thanks so much. When you read that, I reminded myself, that was my book came out, my PR people said, you have to have this type of a bio. And so they wrote that for me. Obviously, the language is very proper on it. Definitely not. And so if you're expecting me to talk like that, everybody, that you're going to be very disappointed. So.
Yeah. Well, hey, you talk better than that. Yeah, no, you make a lot of these ideas, I can understand them. And I grew up watching Rocky Balboa, so I always kid around, I grew up with a punchy brain. So when I feel safe having these conversations with you, it says something about you. You really have figured out how to have this conversation with people that may be intimidated to even approach you because of your credentials.
Yeah.
So what is it about what you do that you love so much?
I think as we've discussed in the past, and it's people talk about finding your passion and all of that. That's true. I mean, but that's not necessarily the most accurate way to do it. I think what you have to do is you have to find a real need. If there's something that you really like, fitness, it can be, for me, it was self-protection. You have to ask yourself, how can I serve this community? I mean, how's it currently being served? And yes, I'm passionate about it, but is there an area that's being underserved? And in my world, it's really the aspect of when your life is literally on the line. It's not the, stuff prior to coming up, the alpha male stuff or any of that. People kind of understand the lower levels of violence and, how to disengage if they want to. There's very little information when you're facing, it's so funny, imminent, which meaning right in front of you. My premise is when you're devoid of choice, meaning if you could have a choice to get out of the situation, you would have. If you would have run away, you could have. If you could have talked your way out of it, you would have. But now you're facing a predator coming at you, and the only tool that's going to work in that situation is violence. And when I say, I use the term violence because violence is a very specific term. If I say fighting, it's a very imprecise term. You can fight with your buddy, you can fight with your wife, you can fight with your kids, you can fight with your boss. It's very imprecise. Whereas if I say, hey, I'm going to do violence to my boss, that's a completely different statement that people will take. So violence is a taboo, word, and it's definitely cost me a lot of problems when I try to put that information out there because people think I'm advocating violence, like I'm encouraging it. And if people understand, my job for any client that I see is to minimize the chance of violence ever coming into their life. And that to me is the most important thing I can ever do for a client.
I really like that. And I don't even think I mentioned at the start here that you wrote a book. I believe it was a bestseller called When Violence is the Answer. And yes. Why don't we I think what I've learned from marketing, you always have to overcome the biggest objection before you can have an open mind. So maybe what have been some of the things misunderstood about this book, just so that we can have people's full attention before we dig in?
Well, it's a provocative title for a reason. A tagline that I'm known for, if people know me in the industry, they know that I always start off just about every talk with violence is rarely the answer. And people love that part of the statement. And they get uncomfortable when I add the second part of the statement. The statement goes, when violence is the answer, violence is rarely the answer. But when it is the answer, it's the only answer. And that's where there's very little information on, because the idea is we're good citizens, the majority of people that I talk to are great, that come out, especially my civilian clients. And we're living great lives. We don't want violence to enter our lives. We don't want to have to use this information. And it seems counterproductive. Why would I want to study something that I don't want to happen? And it's actually counterintuitive because it's a freedom, just like any fear that we face. I mean, when we first got into business, I mean, Vince, how intimidating was it for you the first time? I mean, you're excited, but the first time you put out your first online ad and you had no idea if anybody was going to respond or anything like that, and it was fearful. And then the more you do that skill set of direct marketing that you learn, from the day one to where you are now you're a lot more comfortable with the subject, and the subject doesn't intimidate you anymore. You understand the parameters, the principles, and you know how to deal with it. The reason I want to bring this to people is because we're walking around, the majority of people are walking around, and there's this 600-pound gorilla in the room called violence, the potentiality for it. And it hits us, we can dismiss it for the most part, put it out of our minds until, you're in that area where that unfamiliar body type comes. They seem aggressive. Nothing's potentially happening, but you recognize the potentiality for violence at that time. And oftentimes that's when people say, wow, I have nothing in the toolbox to deal with a situation like this if anything was to go wrong. Women feel this all the time. The unfamiliar guy that gets into the elevator. Women are far more sensitive to the potentiality of violence than men. And the reason being is men, we communicate with violence, and what I mean by that, we're not beating the crap out of each other, but we will push each other around, we'll knock into each other. I mean, I remember at Empire when we were there, we were knocking around, like Beatrice and I were knocking into each other and stuff. It's one of those things. And so we have to navigate sometimes, hey, is this a social situation where we're just either kidding around or trying to alpha each other? Or is this truly, life-threatening? Is this somebody is this a predator that actually really wants to, injure me? Women don't have that. When men put hands on women, it's the real thing. So they truly understand violence. And what I found is the more I teach people, the highest level, justified lethal force is what we call it in the military and law enforcement. The more adept you are at understanding the subject, the less likely you are to ever have violence come into your life. And you're going to do everything in your power to make sure that you minimize the chance. But you don't have that irrational fear when you see somebody. You'd sit there and you'd say, okay, yes, I see this as a potential threat, but until it actually becomes one, I'm going to continue to live my great life. I'm not going to have this irrational fear. I tell people all the time, a lot of people are very concerned that if they look at the subject, it somehow will bring the subject to them. It's that kind of karmic experience that people talk about. And so when they tell me that, I say, well, do you have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen? And most people, because of codes in most buildings, yeah, they have it there. And I said, okay, do you know how to use that fire extinguisher? And they go, oh, yeah, I know how to use it. Oh, well, then you want fire to come to your house, and they start laughing. They go, of course not. And I go, yeah, but you're prepared. And so now you understand there's potentiality that fire could happen. You have a device that you now know how to operate if that happens. And so what do you get to do? You get to enjoy your kitchen, have a great time, have friends over, cook, have fun. And you're not thinking about, oh my God, what would happen if the place, caught on fire, because you've got a plan. And so the same thing goes with violence. You just have to understand how it works, and you have to understand the basics. You do not have to become a super ninja. You do not have to spend years and years to navigate your life and minimize violence. But you do need to understand how it works.
So soon we're going to be talking about principles. And I found it fascinating that, we were talking about the whole world of self-defense, and we hardly talked about actually tactics, skills, levels of that. But before we go there, I had an idea, like, why is it that people don't, explore this and maybe arm themselves? And, we did this fascinating exercise at the front of the room. I don't know if we should paint a picture for them, but it really came down to, I think many people go through their lives as seeing themselves maybe subconsciously as a victim. So They don't maybe intentionally put themselves, because like if something happened to me, everyone would be, oh man, that sucks. But they wouldn't say, well, you weren't able to beat them up. You weren't able to defend yourself. Like, no, I got attacked. So it's almost like acceptable to be a victim. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a subconscious rooted thing there?
Yes. Well, because we don't understand violence, as a society for the most part, it's always been a problem, because people, when given a choice, if they look at a situation, they look at an act of violence, and if instead of getting involved with the story, if you just watch it, whoever is in the dominant position in violence, like if you see something, which is what I did with you guys. What I did, just to explain to your audience, basically I showed a scenario. There's various scenarios I show. I think the one I had was a guy was down on his knees and the other guy was grabbing him by the head, and it looked like he was just about to knee him into the side of the head. And we had been talking about self-protection. And what I said to the crowd was, I said, hey, if you found yourself in this position, you know, after our talk here, do you see some things that you could do? And everybody said, oh, yeah, I did. And so I started asking the class, I said, what would you do from here? And one guy said, well, I think I could hit him in the groin from here. And another guy said, well, I think maybe I could roll into him and get his ankle or something. And it was great. And then I asked the class, I said, do you want to see what I would do? And then, yeah, we want to see what you would do. And so then I took, it was Bedros that was in the dominant position. I pushed him out of the way and I took over his position. I need the person on the ground in the head. And then I dropped over and I showed 4 different strikes that I would have done. And everybody, it happens every time, everybody kind of like was shocked, you know, and they looked at me, they go, well, wait a minute, you know, you didn't tell us we could be that guy. And I said, no. What was my question? My question was, if you found yourself in this position, what would you do? You chose to be in the victim profile. And that's the greatest thing that works against us. You know, I can show you how to punch, kick. I can show you amazing joint breaks. I can show you multiple attackers, how to use a knife, gun, all that good stuff. It's worthless if your mind is not correctly seeing how to use the tool. And the thing that really opened my eyes in this is when I started doing the research in the prison systems. I started, you know, really, I have a lot of friends in corrections, and I was studying the prison gangs because everything the prison gangs do revolves around successful use of the tool of violence. It's their currency. You know, if you're an entrepreneur, you know, our currency is either our market share, you know, possibly, you know, our email lists, you know, we have all sorts of different assets. But in the prison, everything is backed up not by cash flow, but by the successful use of the tool of violence that allows them to run the business, make money. They make millions and millions of dollars, and they run. You know, the prison gangs are so powerful; they're actually running a lot of what's going on out in our streets. And it's just it was a fascinating study. But what was really interesting was they shared with me one study that was done. I want to say it was done probably about, I think, in the last 15 years, where psychiatrists came in and they were showing prisoners like self-defense scenarios, you know, and they would just throw it up there. They'd either show a real act of violence or something, and then they go, what do you think about this? And what was really interesting is they never saw themselves on the losing side of violence. Every time they looked at an act of violence, they said, oh, okay, yeah, he did good. Like what they would do, they'd say, okay, yeah, I see what he did there, but you know, that's the normal person, you know, a normal level prisoner would say, oh, okay, yeah, I see that. Yeah, that's good work. Yeah, that I do that. The alphas were the real interesting ones. And when I say alphas, I mean like the shot callers, the leaders in there, the really, truly just amazingly evil people that are very good at using violence. Those guys would look at it and they'd say, yeah, that was okay, but I would have done it this way, meaning they approved upon it. Now you'd sit there and you'd say to yourself, if you were just looking at it from a pure, you know, good versus bad lens, you'd say, oh, I don't want to be like them. I don't want to do anything. You know, what we're doing is you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. What those guys were doing was protecting their minds. Why? Because they live in an asocial environment. Asocial means it's devoid of communication and it'll get right in to violence. We've experienced asocial sometimes where all of a sudden you just get that feeling and you can feel that somebody's coming in or nonverbal is just screaming at us that, hey, there's something wrong. This guy's approaching me. He's not saying anything and he's getting ready basically to attack you. Well, in prison, if you don't understand that, you don't have that sense about you, you're going to have a really rough time in there because you're going to be preyed upon a lot. So these guys are protecting their minds because they understood a really interesting point. There's nothing to learn from the victim's profile. That doesn't mean that we're not empathetic or that we condone the violence that we see, But what we're trying to do, and what I try to do for my clients, is I want to protect your mind. And so you can only associate with the winning side of violence. And when I equate this, people go, oh, God, it sounds really harsh. I go, why? Every top athlete does the same thing when they do visualization. They never visualize it. If you're a guy like like a Tiger Woods, you don't sit there and say, okay, well, I'm up the tee and my first drive, I shank it and I'm off over in the rough. And then I go from the rough and I knock it into the beach. I do 3 strokes in the beach and then I get up on the green and then I 4-putt. Nobody ever imagines that. What do? They imagine, okay, I get the tee to the fairway to the green, and I putt it right in, and come in, because that's the outcome that you want. And so your brain says, oh, that's what you want me to do. So there's much more of a likelihood that that's how you'll perform. Unfortunately, we're really harsh to ourselves, and we see ourselves in a victim profile all the time because we think we've never been told when we are allowed to use the tool of violence to protect ourselves. And so that's the controversy, that swirls around, because what people hear is they'll hear the first part and they'll say, oh my God, Tim's telling us to, just be really brutal and beat down on these people. That's not it at all. When I have any of my people watch violence, like in the media, real violence, I train them. I say, hey, listen, for the next 30 days, here's your homework. I want you to, every time you see something on, internet, TV, wherever, stop yourself. If you can, turn the sound off so you get rid of the story and you just watch the physical situation. And there's going to be a point in the violent confrontation where somebody gets injured. And then after that first injury to the human body, subsequent injuries happen and that person lands. The good information for you is, wow, what did that guy do that got that type of a reaction out of it? What was that? Oh, he struck him there. And then you realize there's areas of the human body, we have about 70 of them. It's either a nerve area, a bone, or a joint area, that organs, either sensory organs or structure of the human body, basically, that are vulnerable to, any sort of a body weight attack, meaning anybody that weighs at least 90 pounds can put a hell of a lot of trauma into somebody if they know where to throw that 90 pounds. And once we understand that, you say, oh, hey, wait a minute, injury to the human body, and we've all experienced it, it bypasses bigger, faster, stronger. And that's the equalizer for all of us, meaning no matter how much I work out, I can't make my throat any stronger. My throat, the cartilage here is always vulnerable. Obviously, we notice things like the eye, but there's even structures down below that we have in our organs, like the liver and the spleen, that if they get blunt trauma, you're gonna have a very dramatic reaction to people. So that's where, the big change happens. The challenge is we think by doing that, we somehow become violent, and that's not it at all. It's just training our brain to say, okay, if violence comes my way, what do I want you to do? Oh, you want me to find a vulnerable part on their body and you want me to strike it. How do you want me to do that? And so that's the conversation you start having in your head. And that's the methodology that you train in. It's the same way, you know how it is. If you're having trouble in business, if you say, oh my God, my cash flow's down, the only way you're going to get out of that is if you focus on the solution. If you keep going down in depression, you're just gonna, you're gonna roll up in a ball and you're gonna get fetal on it, rather than saying, okay, only thing that's gonna solve this is, a really good promotion. I'm gonna put that together and it's gonna go out next week.
So I had some big takeaways from this. So one thing you said is that, we need to do this because the majority of us live in a reality that's pretty boring, and we're not living in the prison system where, we have to be on our guard. And when I watch Game of Thrones, when I watch, what else do I watch? I don't want to reveal them all here. I need to look at violence from the viewpoint of how was it successful, and not to judge it, but to allow myself to look for learnings that could in fact protect me.
You just said, Game of Thrones and stuff. And I tell people this all the time. Writing is getting so good in TV right now, that they're actually exploring, they're not really saying it, but they're actually giving some very good information about self-protection and violence and how to think. And there's some conversations throughout Game of Thrones that are brilliant, and the mindset that a lot of these characters have. And oftentimes they're the more aggressive characters, and they're kind of the gray characters. You're not really sure if they're completely evil or if they're completely there, but their comments on how they survive a situation or what to do. Oftentimes it gets to the point because the real reason is trying to do half measures in violence can get you in a lot of trouble. If you just try to like, well, I just want to hit him a little bit. I don't want to do any damage. Well, the other person may not be thinking that way. The other person just is there to end you. And so what you really have to do is you have to train your mind to say, okay, we live in this world, in this age of technology, sometimes we think that, we don't have to worry about the physical world at times. And, that's the rude awakening, is when people realize, oh my God, if somebody bigger, faster, and stronger wants to dominate me physically right now, beat me, take my stuff, do whatever, I have not even thought about the subject. I don't know what I'd do, and I don't know how I'd survive it. And it's a real big contrast to, just about 50 years ago, where basically mostly males, mostly young males, but that was a rite of passage. We were all taught how to box. We were all taught how to, take care of ourselves. My grandfather made sure that myself and my cousins knew how to take care of ourselves on there. That's not happening today for very well-meaning reasons, but it's having a detrimental effect because it's turning a lot of people into very, very easy victims for these predators that have no problem using physical violence.
Hey, so we were kind of wrapping up this conversation on how do you get the right outcome. I think everybody's here to get the right outcome, but we're tweaking the mindset here. Let's just kind of finish this off by, you said something that really grabbed my attention. And I'm not sure if you meant for it to be a double meaning or if I've just been listening to too much Grant Cardone at the same time you shared this, but you said you can't block your way to success. You need to strike, you need to attack. And this triggered the whole idea that, you can't save your way to financial security, freedom, etc. You've got to invest. You've got to create offers. You got to bring stuff out. So let's just talk about that whole mindset of you can't block your way to, like, if I'm on the ground and you keep punching me and kicking me, I can't just block. I eventually have to do something.
Right. Yeah. And that's the key. It's readily apparent when I train people on how to use knives, because the goal is nobody wants to get stabbed. But the problem with that is I show, and they're horrible videos, but I'll show video after video of somebody trying to stop somebody from stabbing them. Ooh. And what'll happen is they'll probably do the first 2 or 3 and they'll direct or they'll hold them off, but eventually just blocking is not going to do anything. The person will continue in, and usually it ends up horrible and they end up stabbed to death. And the reason I use that stark example is because you just have to understand the people that survive violence, that survive knife attacks, are the ones that injure the other guy. And meaning they can't undo, they go, okay, yeah, maybe there's a knife. And the interesting thing about knives too, when you train is, a knife is never seen. That's the thing. We changed our training methodologies based off the fact that that when I read DOJ reports, Department of Justice reports on knife attacks across the board, in the high 90s percentiles, the victims never saw a knife. They felt like they were being punched. So all these really cool knife defenses that people show and everything are basically fantasy. You're not going to, that would be a huge luxury if you ever saw anything like that. So what I teach my people to do is, listen, if you can still think and move, you can injure, but you got to stop focusing on what's being done to you, and you need to look at the other guy and say, what's available to me? And that's what'll save your life. And so there's training methodologies that you take people through. What's interesting is it was when I went and trained the traders at the New York Mercantile Exchange, which is a huge commodities exchange with super aggressive traders. I mean, you talk about alphas, these guys were amazing. So I trained them after the trading day every day. I trained them for a whole week from 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock every day. And these guys would come literally fresh off of the trading floor. Half of them would be happy, half of them were pissed off because they weren't doing so good. What they told me, they said, you taught us, I talk about cause and effect, and that you always want to be in cause state. You want to be causing the effect. You don't want somebody causing an effect in you where you're reacting to them. And when they took on the business side, they said, hey, we just want you to know, they called me next week and they said, hey, we just want you to know your physical training methodology and the fact that you taught us, like, especially when our lives is on the line, we have to be the cause. Hey, it works even better when you apply that to our trading, because we realize nothing's going to happen until we execute the trade. And analysis by paralysis, or paralysis by analysis, is just not doing us good. So these guys got to be better traders because they started working in cause state. And the interesting part is, it's a very true statement. There are benefits to understanding how to deal with violence and how to deal with life and death threats, because the decision making that you make there works even better in less desperate, stakes, basically. So it's this understanding that training you to be violent does not make you violent. And there's a lot of counterintuitive approaches that actually have very, very positive results.
Huh. And is this where the whole conversation around, moving a bit more to the tactical approach to defending yourself or to injuring the opponent, where you described, moving towards the situation as opposed to, running away? And I don't know if you want to share that exercise. It was brilliant though, but, it was, I would love for you to it was very counterintuitive of how you approach danger. I know what I would do as a former long distance runner. I would run, but if the guy had a gun, would that be smart?
Well, it's funny. I just did the exercise last night for a group that's out here in Vegas. They have a huge conference going on. I did that exact same thing that I did with you guys. So we're talking about, I simulated an active shooter scenario. Now, active shooters, what we've seen these mass shootings. My idea was just to cover the principles with everybody. When most people get that type of training of active shooter, they do it in a way that literally just scares the hell out of you. It doesn't really teach you anything. So my goal and what we did was to sit there and give you the overall principle. And so what I did was I said, listen, I'm going to call out a step. Every time I'm just going to take one step. And then as I come in and I'm the shooter, I'm pretending to shoot people. Each step I'll shoot, I'll shoot my gun. But you guys are taking the step towards the exit. I would point to the back of the room and say, okay, you're running that way towards the base, 2 away. And so we go through the exercise and I go step, step, step. And you guys are all going towards the back. You're running, you're walking, you're stepping away from me, trying to get to that door. I was able to get, I usually stop at around 12, but if you have like a Glock, it's about 17 rounds, but usually around 12 I stop. So after 12 steps, I've shot 12 people that come in. Then I reverse the situation and I say, okay, this time when I come through, we'll do this exact same method. All I want you to do is take a step towards me. And as soon as one of you can put your hands on me, the exercise stops. Usually I might get 1 or 2 shots off before somebody has their hands on me and the rest of the group can swarm me at that point. And the idea behind that was to show people that the principle is if you give a shooter distance, he's going to be able to work a lot more and do a lot more damage. Whereas if you swarm the shooter and you come towards him, people will still get shot, but it's going to be a lot less, chaotic, and you can control it because it's much harder for a shooter to have people coming at him and not giving him the distance at that point. And that was the point of the exercise. Now, it wasn't the point of the exercise to tell everybody, okay, now you understand, now everybody's going to rush the shooter. But what I did do is I pointed out opportunities. Hey, there are a lot of these shootings that you see a lot of times where the shooters had to reload. And that's a great time to take action, especially if you have nowhere to go. And so I give people options that way. And that's the whole idea. My goal is that when the more intense and dangerous the subject, the calmer I'm going to present it to you. I want to install it in the right part of your brain. And I want to give you principles to work with, not just some quick tactic to say, okay, move here, move there, because I guarantee you it's not going to happen that way when violence comes your way. I'm going to show you some really cool technique and you're going to be like, hey, wait a minute. Can you move to the side? Okay, from that angle, great. Now you're going to have to deal with what's ever coming at you. You can't have some set technique. And so that's the whole idea behind the training is I train you the exact same way predators use violence. And the interesting part about it is that I would just leave everybody is question assumptions in your industry too, because the assumption in my industry is it takes years and years and years of training to be able to protect yourself. It takes years and years of training to become a combat sport athlete and to work within the rules. But the best people in the world at murdering or severely injuring others with just their bare hands and their body and maybe some improvised tools have zero training in combat sports and martial arts. And yet I would put them up against the best, quote unquote, knife fighter in the world or anybody that trains formally, because we're talking about these, the prison gangs. We're talking about the prisoners in there and just how they are with the tool of violence. They understand intent and they understand getting results. They can't afford to get it wrong. And so to go in, it was almost completely taboo for me to go in and look at these people and say, hey, listen, this information, their approach will actually keep my people alive if I give it to them. But you have to have the courage to get out there and put that out, because I'm alone where I'm at for the most part. I'm one of the only people in my industry that talks about justified lethal force and what do you do when you have no options, because I find that's where you need the most critical information. And so if there's some place in your business where you can be counterintuitive and you can really give some good value, you have to be prepared to get the criticism. You have to have you have to be okay with haters, but really you got to focus on, the results you can get for your people. And that's been the best part. That's what's kept me going in this business for the last almost 27 years now, doing it.
That's fascinating. So I've got so many angles here now, but you're talking about a number of things. Hidden truths, I think, was the term you used, and we're likely assuming something that is preventing you from maybe getting to know your clients better, to deliver something they actually want. And I would always take that vantage of running and not moving towards. And I think that's what most people look for, though, when they're getting into self-defense. They get pulled into, finding the best, skills and tools in that. I have a question though, before we get back in. What are people opposing? Like, this sounds to me, I don't know anything about this world. How could you not be in your right mind to want to defend yourself? What's the argument that you're up against?
There's a lot. Like I was, they issued a travel ban in the UK for me in 2011 because I advocated this. They had riots, and I just said, hey, Britain has some, in the UK, some very just horrible self-defense laws that prevent citizens from protecting themselves. They were made in the 50s and they were very well-meaning back then, but it was a very different world back then to what they're facing now. And they're facing terrible knife crime. They're having all sorts of violence, and they're not talking. The other thing I would tell everybody to question when you're talking about that, you will hear throughout many people tell you, it's never been safer. The murder rate's down. Violence is down. It's down from 10 years ago. What they don't do is they don't explore that. Are we really less violent? Or has medical technology advanced so much that something that would have killed somebody a couple of years ago, they now can save that person if they get them in to the hospital in time? I mean, there's stuff that literally 5 years ago they'd be dead, bullet wounds, stuff like that they're saving people, and then technically it's not a murder at that point. And so you have to question stuff like that. I'm not saying we're an overly violent society, but I will say there's a lot more of it than we think. And just having this tool, the one thing I really realized is having this tool really, really helps my clients. I've never seen such changes in people, not because they're trying to be badasses or doing anything. It's the exact opposite. They start making better decisions to minimize the chance. And I would tell you, for your marketing, from a marketing standpoint, in the fitness world or whatever, I had to find out what my clients really asking. See, I thought everybody wanted to do what I did, which was just years and years of training, just become this and go and train all these hardcore dudes and just beat the crap out of people. And that's how I grew up. I loved it. I loved that kind of world. I loved operating in that world, and it was fun. It wasn't until, after 9/11, when I started training civilians, that I realized they're asking a very different question, but they're scared to ask it because they don't want to seem weak. And the question that most of my clients are saying to me is, Tim, I read some of your stuff and I trust you, but I really don't want to learn to be you. I want to learn how I can navigate this world and minimize the chance of violence ever coming into my life so I don't have to use self-defense. And once I understood that as a teacher and an instructor and sharing information, my whole mindset changed. The vast majority of people don't want to, spend years and years becoming practitioners, but they also want to be able to protect themselves.
That's fascinating because you're describing me. I think I was actually one of the guys who put their hands up when you said, who here wants to learn how to fight? And I raised my hand.
Right.
I actually took boxing years ago, and I actually got hit in the face. I think I just bowed out right there and said, I don't know why people do this. I think I did some wrestling with an old boss of mine, a big, muscular, lean guy, and we wrestled on the mats. And I wrestled in high school, but as soon as he put me in a few moves, I felt like I'm done with this. So if I actually wanted to learn martial arts, I would be going there 2 hours a day instead of the gym. I've never actually signed up for martial arts, despite raising my stance. I love to learn how to fight. And you actually, I think this is how you built your business. You basically discovered that there's a niche for justified legal force without, as you described, being you. And I'm like, I'm now, you got my attention. And this comes back to the conversation, for our marketers listening, what are the hidden opportunities in your world?
Yeah. What are they really asking you? Like we talked about, you'd mentioned earlier, but, I said to you guys that, when we were at Empire, I said, probably the big opportunity that's out there is to bring back shame. And of course, everybody went on their heels at that point. And what I meant was I believe there's positive shaming, I grew up in the 80s where you had archetypes, you had Arnold, you had Stallone, you had these, heroes journeys that you're there. They were people that you gave aspirations to. You wanted to be like them. It doesn't mean that you're not, that you're somehow less than because you don't achieve that. But, when we set goals, I don't set small goals. I got to set the big goal that probably will never be achieved, but it'll get me a lot further along if that's my aspiration. So there's positive things to say. I remember at one point going, I'm not satisfied with my training. I'm not satisfied with my performance. I need to get to that point. I was ashamed of it, and not ashamed like we use today, where it's like, it's just like it hobbles you. But I think if you are adept at it, positive shaming can motivate your clients to new things. Because quite honestly, if somebody is, really, overweight and have all sorts of issues with their health and everything, the worst thing you can do is tell them, hey, you're okay just the way you are. That's not being compassionate. That's being ridiculous. You have to, I understand this day and age, we have to be careful how we say it. But I truly feel like the counterintuitive opportunity is, I guess there's no other word for it, positive shaming, if you bring it back, because it's the whole thing. They did a thing a while back where they tried to bring in overweight models to walk the runway on there. And what was really interesting is what they learned, that a lot less sales when it came down, not because the women were overweight. It's because the whole idea is it's an artificial aspirational thing. Women who have very different body types, watching a model walk down the runway in something, will buy that version of the dress because they're hoping it'll make them look more like that model, that aspiration they have, and it'll make them feel good. And it may even motivate them to take better care of their health at that point. People have turned this into, like somehow it's a really negative thing to see somebody who's been very successful at keeping themselves fit or very successful at business or anything like that. And I really think we got to get away from that, because we're just going to end up with total mediocrity. And I don't want that for my clients. And I don't think, anybody that cares wants that for their clients. So, you just have to be careful. And the reason I say that is because that's the counterintuitive thing. Because right now everybody's emoting, everybody is you're okay as you are, you know, this, and it's, I think a lot of it's fun. I think a lot of it's manipulative actually for marketing purposes.
Huh.
And I don't know that you're truly serving your clients all the time if you take that to the extreme.
Yes, I think what I heard when you were sharing that, even just like for myself, was you really do need to figure out what they really want. Maybe just because I want more money, that's not what they actually want. Just because you want to learn how to be that awesome fighter, and that might not be what your clients want. And that really is like flipping the script. And when you get that knowledge, that's really, really important. So, talking about knowledge, let's move on to another conversation. I felt it was really, you know, you're a big commanding guy, I'm always like, oh man, if I say something wrong to this guy, is he going to give me the look and make me feel inferior? But you really expressed humility in terms of sharing that new information can kill a lot of your previous content. And that can be a hit to your pride, especially if you have a public presence, public brand. Just talk about the necessity of evolving, reinventing yourself. Maybe an example that you've had to like, hey, we taught this, we don't teach this anymore, guys. Simple as that. I mean, a lot of people, it sounds obvious. Yeah, we're evolving. Of course, the information is better. Here's the new information. I've seen so many guys stick to their guns because they think there's like, they don't want to contradict themselves. I don't know what it is, if it's just the ego or whatnot.
Yeah, there's some that it goes back to the whole idea that we are not our customer. That's the one thing you have to understand. I got a lot of my buddies, like I just did a shooting program with one of my friends, and he's like an amazing Army special operations operator. He's top guy. Problem is when I deal with those guys, it takes so much convincing to get them to do something. Why? They're looking at their peer group and they're saying, well, you want me to teach this? There's really no big deal because, I go, yeah, you and your 10 buddies know this information. The rest of the world has no clue. And by the way, your methods are much more superior to what's being taught out there right now. And you can really help people. So I have to do that. So the worst thing, we need to get outside of our world, because we're immersed in it, we're experts, and we need to just say, hey, how does the general public respond to this? Just talk to people that are really outside and just, throw some of your ideas. If it's fitness, sit there and say, hey, how do you feel about fitness? What's your biggest challenge? Why don't you not like going to the gym? Or why do you do this? Or why do you do that? You'll find out hooks and marketing and great, lead generation material that you never would have found if you didn't ask those questions, or if you tried to see everything through your lens. I would say the reason the guys that you're talking about continue to do their legacy problems, their legacy things, so this is the way I did it, this is the way you're going to do it. It's more of an ego thing. It's like, you don't want to better. My goal is to make, I tell people all the time, I want you better than me at that stage. After X amount of hours, I want you better than I was at X amount of hours. I want to make you better than me. I don't want you to have to go through what I went through. And so, whereas the principles of my training have stayed rock solid and have not changed, my methods are constantly changing. If I can get a better result for somebody, I will. Currently, in the program that we have right now, I wish this is the way I was trained initially. It would have saved me years of understanding information. What we can deliver to our people right now is such a better program than what I came in with. And you have to be okay with that. You have to sit there and go, yeah, it made me look really cool as an instructor to teach this, but it wasn't useful to my client. If anything, the worst thing you can do is for somebody is be the guru. Meaning, if all anybody sits there after going to training with me and go, man, Tim was so great, man, you should have seen how he did this or how he did that. That does you no good, because if we're talking about violence, I'm not going to be there when it happens. I got to make sure you understand it and you know how to use it and whatever's appropriate at your level to get a result. And that's something I think a lot of us forget. I think a lot of us forget what it's like to be a newbie on something. And that's why 5 years ago, I said every year I pick a new skill set where I become a student, where I do something that's completely unfamiliar to me. And I got to tell you, Vince, it's made me a much better instructor, much more compassionate, much more patient with people. And I understand. I remember I did one of the things that really got me was I just said, hey, I want to learn how to do formal kettlebell training, like the actual competition kettlebell training, the GS stuff. And I just want to do it, just saying, I think, oh, I'm pretty good at this. This shouldn't be too hard. Oh man, when you get down to the technical stuff of being able to go, it was humbling, when I was doing that. And I became such a better instructor that year because I realized some of the things that I were assuming were easy for my clients weren't. And I was able to actually make tweaks in them and improve their abilities based off of me understanding what it's like to take a new skill set on.
I love that. One of the things you said, kind of to summarize, wrap up this part of our conversation, is that you don't want to take away, I love that, don't take away the right steps from your students. There are millions of people out there who find your information revolutionary. You're assuming people know what you know. That was refreshing.
Yeah.
Almost like you can get into business to like, hey, look how much I'm learning, guys. Like, well, are people keeping up? Are they executing? They have something to show for it?
Yeah, well, it hit me a couple of years ago. I got a couple of very successful friends that do, they did early masterminds, they had dealt big teleconferences and stuff, and they were wildly successful. And then one year they said, you know what, because they were evolving so much, they said, this goal setting stuff, we don't need it. We're going to take that out. Look, because we're not doing goal setting anymore. We're doing this, blah, blah, blah.
Interesting.
They rolled it out. It was a complete disaster. Why? Because they were up here, but their clients were still here. Their clients needed those early methods of goal setting so that they could open up their minds to say, oh, potentially, okay, now I don't need that anymore. And my friends, they lost a significant amount of income the first year because they thought everybody was where they were at. And they realized, hey, we have to meet our clients where they're at and help them up and show them, okay, this is where you're at. So I don't train, when I train new people, especially when I train civilians, it's not necessarily the way I would like to train. I like to walk into a military unit, highly trained military unit, that I don't have to explain why we're using violence. The guys all understand that. We can just get right into it right away. And we can go a little harder, for a variety of reasons with groups like that. That's fun. That's not good. That's not challenging as an instructor, though. What's challenging as an instructor is to show up. You've got 50 people literally from all points of the globe showing up, and I got 2 days to get this information to them. And how can I do it? There's language barriers, there's fears, there's all sorts of stuff that you have to overcome. And to me, that's a much more challenging position than anything else. And I learn the most from my new clients, people who are completely unfamiliar with violence. They end up teaching me more than, my most elite commandos, who are great, but I already know how they're going to operate,
Yeah. And I think they can, I think you shared a neat idea where they don't even know how to articulate their questions. So this forces you to figure out what they're actually asking me to give language to it. And then like, oh, okay, that's what I was trying to ask. And now they know how to solve it with the new information you give them. Two more principles that we talked about that I really enjoyed. And we talked about the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. Can you help us separate those out? Because you stumped me. I'm like, I should know this. You explain it and where this comes into teaching.
So originally it's a Peter Drucker statement. Peter Drucker was a big management consultant in the 50s. Brilliant guy. And I read it recently, a couple of years ago. Tim Ferriss, in one of his books, did a version of it, and it just hit me. Drucker defines effectiveness as identifying the right things first. That's the most important thing is okay, what is effective? What are the right things? Efficiency is doing the right things the right way. So the problem, especially in my world, is a lot of people get really efficient at the wrong things, as far as their own self-protection. And what I mean by that is they'll train in a combat sport or a martial art that's purely competitive, takes out all injury to the human body. I mean, I love combat sports. I grew up loving boxing. I live here in Vegas. I'm friends with all people, both management and fighters in the UFC. There's no bigger combat sport, fan than me, and I love it. But the problem is, in order to gamify violence, you have to take injury out of the human body. The last time I looked at the UFC rules, 27 of the 31 rules had to do with injury to the human body. And so, if you're training in that way and you don't have a direct path to injury, it's a real problem. And because when you're dealing with violence on the street, you don't have a ring, you don't have a ref, and you don't have agreed upon rules, and that's a very different world that you have to operate in. So one's not better than the other. There's no place for violence in combat sports, and combat sport rules don't apply out in the street. And it's just a reality that you have to understand. Some of my best students have been combat sport practitioners who I just have to change a couple of things because they've already got the mindset and they're willing to put the work in. So now I just change up a couple of things to teach them how to injure the human body to be able to save their life on the street.
Gotcha. So what you're saying is the danger here of not getting this right is that you could create an artificial environment for your client not to be successful.
Yeah, and that whole thing, it's just with everything, like anything you're doing, it's like, okay, is this the right thing? Is this effective first? You always want to make sure that whatever you're teaching somebody is truly effective first, and then you can improve upon their coordination, that's the efficiency path after that. Right. The worst thing you can do though is give them a bad foundation. I mean, what if like I know we've all seen it. It's mind boggling when you see some of the people doing like say good mornings in the morning, and the form is terrible, and they're just slamming. They're efficient. They're going efficiently wrong, but they were instructed in a very ineffective way that's going to end up injuring themselves. So that's the whole idea. Is you want to make sure that whatever you're putting out there is effective for your client first, before you start introducing efficiency. Because the reality is, in my world, you don't have to be efficient. You just have to be effective. And when you look at real acts of violence, it's ugly. It's never beauty. It's not, there's no flow to it. There's no beautiful athletic movements or anything. It's just straight and to the point, but it's effective.
And this kind of brings me to the last conversation I wanted to have. It actually brings your son into the conversation as well, because he signed up for a course called Hustle and Hunt, which is how to hit your first $10,000 a month in 100 days. And there's 9 steps. And the first couple steps are not that exciting. They're the right steps though. Nailing your niche, perfecting your flagship program, having a magnetic marketing message, having unique points of differentiation. This is the hardest stuff, but everyone wants to skip it and go right to the paid ads and to the funnels and to the split testing and to the, strategic alliances. And I'm like, none of that stuff will work. At least it won't work as effectively as it could work if you don't have a unique value proposition. If you're not targeting a specific person with an awesome program, with a killer process. And this kind of, you hit on this, you really talked about, again, your words here, reality is inconvenient and boring. And then I added my own little spin to this. I've been sharing with my followers. It's the boring stuff that typically builds or produces the breakthroughs.
Oh yeah, I come down to people, like people will say, I have guys that have been with me a couple of years, and they'll say, "Hey, I really want to learn this particular really cool move that you have, like a particularly hard like joint break throw or something like that." The first thing I'll do is I'll watch them on the floor, and I'll realize their stances are way off. They're not moving correctly. So I could show them that, but they don't have the foundation to support it. And so, we go back to the boring thing and go, okay, let me see your stances. Go through this, this, and this. When they're doing their free practice, they're making sure they're stepping exactly where they need to be before I ever show them any sort of a move. Because if the foundation is flawed, everything else is going to just fall apart. And it's putting that work in to the basics and building that really strong foundation that makes it. I mean, when your guys are, what you're talking about, finding your niche, finding your marketing message and everything is so important, because the creative part of it is really just 20% of the process. If you don't have the right offer and you don't have the right group that you're offering it to, right, then you can have the best creative in the world and, the really cool paid ad, it's not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
People need to know that when they come in, they go, oh, I understand the foundation of what this person's offering me. And this is in alignment with what I want. And now the creative that you have with your copywriting, your ads and everything, that's where it has a real effect. And it's a hard thing for people to understand, and I think oftentimes we get bored with what works,
Yeah.
It's one of those things like, oh, let's do something crazy,
Yeah. Show me how to kill the guy with one finger,
Exactly.
Right. So, I think the way you phrased this was getting to the next level is not cosmetics.
Yes.
I love that. Hey, why don't we just finish off with, I love to hear what's going on in your life right now, Tim. What's getting you excited? And I also would love to hear, what's going really well, what's not going so well. And then we'll
where do you want to start with that?
Yeah, what's going really well right now? What's something not going so well that you're working on yourself?
Well, I'll just, I'll tell everybody, hey, it's a long journey. I've been doing this for 27 years. I have a long-term partner that was a good person and everything. I realized I went out, I was traveling all over the world, building my business and everything. And I realized that I was not paying enough attention to the core of the business and everything. My partner, he was older and he decided to leave the company last year. It was great, but I've now inherited basically a Frankenstein of, email lists and all this other stuff that I'm currently cleaning up. So I'm getting back to my roots. I'm actually doing exactly what we just talked about. My focus this summer is pure foundational work. It's none of the fun stuff. It's not content creation or any of that. I have all that. I'm very fortunate to have a big library of content. But I'm back to my roots again. I'm re-listening to old instructors of mine that taught me how to, write copy, how to do things. Cool. I'm relearning things again for the digital age because I didn't have to really do a lot of the marketing aspect of things for the last couple of years. And it's been fun. I mean, it's a lot, but it's great. But it's also ownership of it. I completely took full ownership of the fact that, hey, if things aren't the way I want them in the business, it's me. I can't, no matter how successful you guys get, you can't outsource some things. You always have to look at your operations. You always have to be in control of your marketing message and your checkbook at all times. It's just really, really important. It sounds like basic stuff, but believe me, you get a little bit of success and you can go on. You want to get rid of anything that you don't really enjoy, and you can do that, but you have to oversee it. You have to monitor it. So, so that's where I'm at. I just don't want people to think that you get to a certain point and then everything's on autopilot. It's just not, not if you really enjoy what you do.
Oh man, I remember, sometimes I hear things the way I want to hear them. I want to make sure I got it right, but I pulled you aside and we were kind of joking around about this, but I think it's much more, carries much more weight coming from a gentleman like yourself, having been not just in the self-defense world, but business for 27 years. Well, what did you say about financial security? If you're looking for financial security, yes, this world produces some awesome paydays, et cetera, and we're winning. But just kind of give this whole idea of financial security another reframe for entrepreneurs. You're like, I just want financial freedom. I'm like, man, I'm like, there's never any money in my bank account. I'm always like reinvesting it. And yeah, we put some aside every once in a while, but I'm playing the long game. I don't know if people actually get this.
Well, when we look at it, it's so funny because you think you're there and then you want to get to that next level. And what are you willing to do the next level? I mean, perfect example is our mutual friend Bedros. He's ramping up right now. What's he doing? He's tightening up his belt. He's doing certain things. Why? Because he wants to get to that $30 million level. He needs to get up there. And in order to do that, what does he have to do? He actually has to invest more to get there and to do that. But that's his drift. I mean, I really got it at Empire. He's the most recent example of that to me. And I applaud him for it because he could have just cruised. He could have stayed where he's at, making a super comfortable life and, not get as aggressive as where he wants to go. But then he wouldn't be him, and that's what I've noticed. I mean, I have clients that are billionaires and all. Nobody's ever satisfied with where they are. That doesn't mean they're greedy. It means they want to make a bigger impact. In order to make a bigger impact, you have to be okay not being financially secure. Right now, I have a cash flow crunch I'm equity rich, but my cash flow is taking a hit because I'm investing a lot right now. And I'm okay with that. I've had my peaks and valleys, and I understand all of that. I mean, my idea now if I told myself 20 years ago that my current situation would be really, really bad, I would tell myself I was insane. Like, dude, if I was making that much money, it'd be great. But we all know where we want to go.
Sure.
So it's funny when you get there. But yeah, you can't ever, you have to be very careful in relationships and everything else, because the entrepreneur road is a really different one, and it's absolutely critical. I mean, what's so great about my son being in your group and how he's responded is he's seen me over the years, but I was never one of those dads just like, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. But what's so great is to find him mentors like you and stuff, and to see him. And I told him, I go, I wish I had this information at your age. I said, it's going to be such a different world, the more you work on it. And he's so encouraged with it. And it's really cool to see that, in people that are going for it. But it never gets easy. You're always going to be struggling. I don't know. I was just talking to somebody who is, you all know who it is. I'm not going to share with it, but he's going through a hell of a time right now and wildly successful, but he's had some real challenges and he's dealing with some media issues and stuff like that. And you'd think this guy has everything set, but he's not, so we're always going to have those things. But if you need security, this is not your world. This is not the place to be. And that's okay. My wife is a police captain out here in Vegas, and she tells me all the time, she goes, I don't know how you do it. I couldn't do it. And she's a highly competent, world-known person in the law enforcement world. I mean, leads, she runs a command that oversees almost 500,000 people. And she's looking at me like, oh my God, you write ads and you put this out. And, it's just intimidating for some people. So, and it's okay if it's not for you, but don't expect security.
I love it. Thanks, Tim. That's such a great note. I feel like I could just keep opening up new conversations here, but let's just wrap up on a simple one here. What are you looking forward to these days?
Really, the technology's got to the point to where I can really deliver a virtual trading platform that I'm really satisfied with. It gives a really, really good result. And for the first time, I can see where I truly can make sure that there's no degradation in quality of instruction, because that's a big challenge. People watch you in all parts of the earth, and it's just not, physically able to train everybody that way. But I certainly don't want to put information out there. There are organizations out there in the self-defense world that'll certify somebody over a weekend to be an instructor. Our instructors, it's a minimum of 3 to 5 for them just to get their base instructor level. And then a master instructor takes 10 years of being an instructor. The majority of people that I put out on the floor are master instructors. And that's what I want to deliver to people, is that type of quality. Now through where we are in this world, virtually, you can do that. You can actually do it. I mean, look what we're doing right now. This is, even 10 years ago, this is almost unthinkable, cost-wise and everything. It would have been ridiculously expensive to do what you and I are doing here today. So you have to be okay with that. And you have to sit there every time there's a new opportunity to deliver something, look at it and say, hey, is that something that we can do? And I got to say, I have so much fun creating content virtual, and the feedback that you get is great. And when you can talk to somebody that literally is on the other side of the world, and you put out a module or something that really had an impact on them, and they tell you, and they've never met you before, you've never trained with them or anything like that, and they say that is the best explanation I've ever heard for X, Y, or Z. You cleared up this, and this with somebody I've never even met. That's just awesome.
I love it. Yeah, you're doing some amazing stuff, and if there's ever an opportunity I can support you with anything new or something you want to get out to more people, please let me know. And why don't we just wrap up here, Tim, with where can people learn more, connect with you, tap into what you're doing, which channels, websites, podcasts, any kind of channels you want to direct people towards, and we can put in the show notes here.
I'm going to start off with, let me explain why I'm going to do that. So if you text protect self, all one word, all lowercase, to 888-555, you'll get right in our system. It'll get you a free download of my book. And the reason I'm starting off with that is because you have to understand, in this age that we're in right now, I've been, I told you about my UK ban. the New York Times kept my book off the list because it has violence in the title. Facebook, I had to go to Facebook because Facebook thought I was promoting violence. Google, I gave a talk at Google, so Google would start letting me go. The only reason I'm saying that's a guaranteed way, that's one of the few platforms right now that I can reach people and they will get my material if they want to read it and stuff like that. So that's a good way to go. Anybody else?
Protect self to
Protect self. Yeah.
888-555.
Yeah, if they just text to that, and it'll start the process there. And then, of course, obviously, you can go to targetfocustraining.com, get my newsletter. Everything's free. I want people to understand, and that's why I appreciate this, Vince, to have this kind of time to actually kind of explain, violence and why I teach it. But I don't know if I can help people. They have to determine that. And the best way to do it is just get some more material. I got a lot of free material that'll really explain what we do. And if I can help them, I would love to.
Yeah. Say the URL one more time, just to make sure I got it.
Targetfocustraining.com, all one word.
Targetfocustraining.com, one word. Awesome. That's great. All right. Hey, Tim, super awesome conversation, interview, man. Super grateful for your time. I know you just came back from a vacation. How was the trip, by the way?
The trip itself was great. The travel, I haven't had a bad travel situation in a while, and I just had one. So.
Oh, man. You didn't have to choke anybody out on the airplane, did you? You didn't have to take anybody out on the airplane, did you?
No. I think my wife was going to take me out at one point.
Hey, we've all been there. You know the magic words, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, dear.
I'm sorry. I was wrong. Will you forgive me?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So, hey, guys, let's wrap it up here. This is time to bless someone that you know. Who are you thinking of right now that will love this episode? You got to be thinking of at least one person. And what we want you to do next is screenshot this on your phone, maybe drop a one-liner that Tim dropped that was memorable and shareable. Tag us on Instagram and just be a go-giver. Hook someone up and don't keep this information to yourself. And maybe we'll reshare it, give you some visibility too. So, hey, once again, thank you for joining us. Tim, thank you once again.
Appreciate it, man. Have a great week.
And everybody else, you have a great week as well. Positive, memorable, and a productive one. Take care, all.